I wasn't supposed to be in that building that night. The lights were off, the parking lot was almost empty, and every sane person ya había ido a casa hace horas. But for someone who's scared of their own silence, late is often the safest place to be. My plan was simple. Go up, grab a few files I'd forgotten, on purpose, and avoid returning to the apartment where everything still smelled like Elena. What I didn't know was that, on the top floor of Moretti Global, my CEO was fighting her own ghosts in the most unexpected way. And that, minutes later, I would cross a line no employee should ever cross with their boss. If you like emotional, slow-burn stories about grief, second chances, and the kind of love that shows up when you're completely broken, stay with me until the end. I'm going to tell you what I saw my CEO doing late at night and what I whispered afterward that changed both of our lives. Before we dive in, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Because this isn't just a story about romance. It's the story of two people who were dead inside until they dared to dance.
That night, I walked into the lobby of Moretti Global with a briefcase in my hand and a lie on my lips. I told myself I was there because I needed a few financial reports I'd left on my desk. The truth was uglier. I just didn't want to sit alone in my living room, staring at the spot where Elena used to laugh. Oscar, the night guard, lifted his eyebrows when he saw me. "Working late again, Mr. Vidal?" he joked, scanning my badge. "You know they say too much work kills you." If only he knew. I forced a polite smile and muttered something about just a few minutes. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt longer than usual. I'd been in the finance department for 8 years. Good salary, predictable routine, impeccable spreadsheets. From the outside, I was the picture of stability. On the inside, I hadn't left the day of Elena's diagnosis. 3 years had passed since cancer took her away, 18 brutal months from the first tests to the last breath. At work, a rumor spread that she had left me for someone else. I never bothered to correct it. A divorce was easier for people to digest than watching their colleague talk about palliative care and hospital corridors. My parents kept saying I should start again. My friends stopped inviting me out when they realized I always found an excuse not to go. So I filled my nights, volunteering at the animal shelter on Tuesdays, lifting weights at the 24-hour gym when everyone else was asleep, driving around the city until exhaustion finally knocked me out. Anything to avoid turning the key in the lock and walking into that apartment that still felt like hers, not mine. That night, as the elevator doors opened to a dark, silent floor, I thought it would be just another round of the same routine. Pick up some papers. Pretend to be busy. Outrun the emptiness for a few more hours. I had no idea I was walking straight into someone else's private ritual. The 15th floor usually greeted you with bright lights and the constant hum of computers. That night, it was a corridor of shadows. The motion sensors should have turned the lights on, but nothing happened. I pulled out my phone and used the flashlight to find my way between desks and chairs. Halfway to my workstation, a faint sound sliced through the silence. It wasn't the buzz of electronics or the click of a distant keyboard. It was humming. A melody, soft and low, coming from the executive wing, where people like me had no reason to be at that hour. My brain told me to ignore it, to grab my documents and leave. But curiosity and loneliness are a dangerous combination. I followed the sound, past the conference rooms, past the break area with its empty coffee cups, until I reached the corridor of the senior offices. Most doors were firmly shut, their nameplates barely visible in the dim light, except one. The door to the CEO's office was slightly open, a warm strip of light spilling into the dark hallway. Lucía Moretti was a legend in that building. The woman who had started the company in a tiny shared space and turned it into a heavyweight in the market. Sharp mind, immaculate suits, impossible schedule. In 8 years there, I could count on one hand the times she'd spoken directly to me. She lived in a different orbit, board meetings, investors, media interviews. I was just another name attached to a balance sheet. I should have walked away. Instead, I stepped closer, the light of my phone still illuminating the floor in front of me. When I reached the door, I glanced inside, just for a second. And in that second, the image I had of my CEO shattered completely. Lucía was barefoot in the middle of her office. Her usual armor, a tailored blazer and high heels, was gone. The jacket lay thrown over a chair, and she wore a simple red dress I'd never seen before. Her auburn hair wasn't in its usual tight bun. It fell loose around her shoulders, a little messy, almost human. She was turning slowly, tracing small circles on the expensive carpet, eyes closed, tears glistening on her cheeks. There was no music playing in the room, no speaker, no visible headphones. But her body moved as if she could hear something I couldn't, following a rhythm only she knew. I froze in the doorway, breath caught in my throat. The weak beam of my phone's flashlight probably gave me away, but she seemed so far away in her own mind that she didn't notice. I had never seen anyone look that alone, not even the man who stared back at me from my bathroom mirror every morning. Eventually, she opened her eyes. For one heartbeat, she didn't seem to understand what she was seeing. Then her gaze focused on me, and panic flooded her features. She stumbled to a stop, reaching instinctively for her heels, as if putting them on could magically rebuild the walls her dance had just torn down. "I'm sorry," she blurted out, voice shaking. "I thought everyone had left." That was the moment when I should have apologized, mumbled some excuse about needing documents, and backed out. We could both have pretended the scene never happened. But my eyes were glued to her face, to that raw vulnerability I had never seen in any quarterly meeting or press photo. She looked human, real, broken in a way I recognized deep down. So instead of retreating, I stepped over the line. "I came back for some paperwork," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet room. I didn't mean to interrupt. She tried to pull herself together, wiping her tears with the back of her hand, straightening her shoulders. You could almost see her trying to drag the CEO persona back over herself like a coat. "Still," she murmured, "you shouldn't have to see this." I could have let her rebuild the distance. Instead, I heard myself saying, "My wife died 3 years ago." The words came out flat, heavy, like they had been waiting behind my teeth for too long. Lucía froze, one shoe still dangling from her hand. Her eyes searched my face, trying to understand why a lower-level finance employee was suddenly sharing something so personal. "It was cancer," I continued quietly. 18 months from diagnosis to goodbye. I told her how everyone at the office assumed Elena had left me, and how I had never bothered to correct them. It was easier than seeing pity in their eyes, I admitted. As I spoke, I stepped further into the room, until the door swung silently shut behind me. I told her about my nights, the animal shelter, the midnight gym sessions, the endless drives through empty streets. I confessed that I did anything I could to avoid walking into a silent apartment full of her things. When I finally stopped talking, the room felt different, as if the air itself had thickened. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because the way you were dancing," I said, choosing my words carefully. "That's how I feel every single night. And I thought maybe you'd understand what no one else seems to get." She held my gaze for a long moment, her defenses flickering. Then something inside her gave way. "My husband and daughter died 5 years ago," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but she kept going. "They were driving to visit his parents. I was supposed to go with them, but I stayed to finish a project. I told them I'd join them the next day." She didn't need to describe the phone call. The way her eyes hardened for a second said enough. "We met in a dance class," she added after a pause. "Dancing was our thing, Marcos and I. Sophia always tried to copy us in the living room." Her mouth twisted in something between a smile and a sob. "Now, every year on this night, I come here and dance alone. I can't do it at home. The house is too full of them. But here I can pretend I'm someone else for a few minutes." I understood more than I wanted to. My own chest ached with a familiarity that scared me. 2 people in a glass office, surrounded by city lights, wearing grief like invisible armor. For a moment, we just stood there, surrounded by silence and confessions that had never been meant for the workplace. Lucía still had her heels at her feet, her bare toes curled into the carpet. I realized this was one of those crossroads moments. Either we both retreated behind our professional roles, or we let something entirely new begin. My heart was hammering. My brain screamed at me to shut up. Instead, I said, "Dance with me." Her head snapped up. "What? Dance with me?" I repeated, feeling equally terrified and strangely calm. "You don't have to dance alone." She shook her head immediately. "That isn't appropriate," she said, though her tone lacked its usual steel. "You work for me, Daniel. This already crosses so many lines." She was right. On every logical level, she was absolutely right. If someone walked in, there'd be no way to explain it. It could hurt her reputation, my career, the company's image. It could turn into gossip, scandal, whispered conversations in break rooms for years. But logic had kept us both breathing without really living for too long. I know it's not appropriate, I said quietly. But when was the last time you danced with someone who wasn't a memory? Her shoulders sagged just a little. 5 years, she whispered. Since the accident. I took a breath and extended my hand to her, palm open. No grand gestures. No charm. Just a man who was tired of grief being his only companion. She stared at my hand like it was a cliff edge. Then, slowly, she set her shoes aside and slipped her fingers into mine. Her hand was cold and trembling when I guided her toward the center of the office. There was no music, no candlelight, no soft focus filter, just fluorescent lights, glass walls, and 2 very damaged people. I placed my other hand gently at her waist, careful to keep a respectful distance. She laid her free hand on my shoulder, so lightly that I almost couldn't feel it. For a few seconds we just stood there, facing each other, unsure how to begin. Then our feet started to move, hesitant steps in small circles, with no grace and even less coordination. It was, without exaggeration, the most awkward dance I'd ever experienced. And yet, somehow, it meant more than any perfect waltz I had ever seen. We weren't dancing to impress anyone. We were simply refusing to stand still in our pain. I have no idea what I'm doing, Lucía admitted after a moment, a shaky breath escaping her. Marcos always led. I just followed. A faint, sad smile tugged at my mouth. Elena used to say I had 2 left feet, I replied. She'd laugh every time I stepped on her toes. For the first time that night, a shadow of a real smile crossed Lucía's face. Marcos would spend hours teaching me new steps, she said softly. He used to say dancing was like life. You have to trust your partner and be willing to risk looking ridiculous. That sounds like something Elena would have said, I answered. She was always pushing me to try new things, to not live so safely. We continued moving, clumsy and slow, but less stiff now. Outside, the city lights blinked through the glass like distant stars. Inside, the weight on my chest felt, not lighter, exactly, but shared. I woke up the next morning thinking maybe I'd dreamed the whole thing. But then I opened my email and saw a short message from Lucía. Would you like to come over tomorrow? It read. I'm cooking a proper meal. It's too much for just one person. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Accepting meant stepping even further out of the safe, numb routine I'd built. Declining meant going back to spending this kind of night alone. My fingers moved before my doubts could catch up. I wrote back. I'd love to. 24 hours later, I was standing on her doorstep with a box from a bakery in my hands. I'd changed shirts 3 times before leaving the apartment, arguing with myself in the mirror like a teenager before a first date. When she opened the door, she wasn't the CEO in a sharp suit. She wore a soft sweater and joggers, her hair loose around her face, no trace of the boardroom warrior. Hi, she said, nerves evident in the tiny crack of her voice. Hi, I answered, holding up the box. I brought dessert. I hope you like apple pie. Her eyes lit up. Apple pie is perfect. Come in. Her home was beautiful, tastefully decorated, all warm colors and comfortable furniture. But there was a stillness to it, a quiet echo that only exists in a house meant for more people than it currently holds. Your place is really nice, I said honestly. Too big for just me, she replied with a sad little smile. Marcos and I bought it planning to fill it with noise. Now it's mostly echoes. In the dining room, the table was set as if she were expecting a family. Multiple dishes, neatly arranged, like she'd been waiting for someone else to sit down for years. You didn't have to go to so much trouble, I said, genuinely moved. I wanted to, she answered simply. I haven't cooked like this in a long time. It felt good to have a reason. At first, the conversation stumbled along the safe surface. Work, harmless office anecdotes, travel stories told without too much emotion. But eventually, she put down her fork, looked at me, and asked, Tell me about Elena. What was she like? Before the hospital, people usually change the subject when I mention my wife. To have someone ask about her so directly caught me off guard. She was funny, I said slowly. Not loud funny. The kind of funny that sneaks up on you. She'd say something with a straight face, and it took you a second to realize it was a joke. I told her Elena was a 3rd-grade teacher who treated her students like they were her own. That she loved dancing in the kitchen while cooking, dragging me along whether I wanted to or not. Lucia listened as if each detail mattered. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand, just for a moment. She sounds wonderful, she said. She was, I replied. What about Marcos and Sophia? Her expression softened. Marcos was steady, she said, eyes distant. The kind of person that made you feel safe just by being in the room. He was an architect. He could talk for hours about how a building could make people feel. Then her face lit up with a bittersweet brightness. And Sophia was pure energy. Always moving, always laughing. She wanted to be a dancer one day. We talked until the plates grew cold and the light outside faded. We moved to the living room, where she lit a fire and dimmed the lamps, the room filling with a gentle, golden glow. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't talking to someone who was afraid of my pain. Our lives began to overlap in small, careful ways. We started meeting for coffee before work, arriving separately, but always leaving together. At the office, she remained the composed, demanding CO everyone knew. After hours, we were just two people sharing pieces of ourselves we'd kept locked away. On weekends, we sometimes wandered through the city with no agenda. Lucia took me to a tiny bookstore hidden on a quiet street, a place she used to visit with Sophia on Saturdays. I took her to the park where Elena and I had used to walk, to the exact bench where I'd scattered some of her ashes. Those places, once too painful to face, slowly transformed into shared ground instead of personal altars. But as warmth crept back into our days, so did something darker, guilt. Lucia admitted one afternoon, voice barely above a whisper, that every time she caught herself laughing with me, a part of her felt like she was betraying Marcos and Sophia. I understood that all too well. I'd find myself enjoying a moment, then suddenly think, if Elena could see me right now, would she be hurt? We had both heard that cliché phrase 1,000 times. They'd want you to be happy. It's easy to say from the outside. Harder to believe when your heart feels like stepping forward is abandoning the ones you lost. Friends and family tried to push us along. Her sister sent her profiles from dating apps, insisting she was too young to spend the rest of her life alone. My parents kept introducing me to nice women from church, convinced love worked on a schedule. What no one seemed to understand was that happiness, when you're grieving, can feel like treason. Still, we kept seeing each other, sharing small joys, quiet moments, and memories that hurt and healed at the same time. We existed in a strange in-between, more than friends, not yet defined as anything else. Neither of us wanted to label it and risk breaking the fragile balance. Then came the date that changed everything. 5 years since the accident that had taken Marcos and Sophia. I'd known the anniversary was coming, but she hadn't said much about it. That evening, when I arrived at her house for our usual dinner, I saw immediately that something was different. Her eyes were red, her shoulders tense, her voice thin. It's been 5 years today, she said quietly as I stepped inside. Since the accident. My instinct was to back away and say, I'm sorry, I can go. You probably want to be alone. But she shook her head. I don't want to be alone, she cut in. I've spent 5 years being alone on this day. I can't do it anymore. So I stayed. We didn't talk much at first. We sat on the couch, and she leaned against me while I wrapped my arms around her. Her tears soaked my shirt, but I didn't move. It was nothing like that first night in the office. This wasn't two strangers cautiously opening up. This was a woman allowing herself to be seen at her lowest and trusting me not to run. At some point, she lifted her head and looked at me, eyes swollen but clear. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? I asked softly. Of this? Of us. Of what it means, she replied. Of losing someone again. Of surviving it again. I took a deep breath. This was another one of those crossroads. I'm falling in love with you, Lucia, I said. The silence that followed felt like free fall. Her face went pale, then flushed, then wet with new tears. I'm scared, she repeated, voice breaking. What if I love you, and then lose you too? I don't know if I can survive that twice. I knew that fear intimately. After Elena died, I had sworn I'd never let anyone get close enough to break me like that again. But sitting there with Lucia in my arms, it hit me. Hiding from love had turned me into a ghost in my own life. None of us knows what's coming, I said softly. Tomorrow, next year, 10 years from now. But I'd rather spend whatever time I have actually loving someone than live the rest of my life asking what if. Her lip trembled. I think I've been in love with you for a while, she admitted at last. I was just too afraid to name it. She kissed me then, slowly at first, then with a kind of desperate tenderness we had both been holding back. The next months felt like waking up after a long coma. We stopped hiding the fact that we spent time together, though we kept things strictly professional at the office. And, of course, the whispers began. People talked. Some colleagues looked at me with curiosity. Others looked at her with judgment, as if happiness in your 40s was something suspicious. Eventually, the board of directors decided they had opinions. They called her into a meeting without me. That night, after everyone had left, she paced her office while telling me what had happened. They said my judgment might be compromised, she fumed. That I'm letting my personal life interfere with the company. What did you tell them? I asked. I showed them the numbers, she said. Record profits. Solid strategies. Then I told them if they didn't trust my leadership because I dared to be happy outside of work, they were free to look for another CEO. You didn't, I breathed. Oh, I did, she replied, a fierce light in her eyes. I'm done apologizing for being human. The board backed down, for the moment. But the scrutiny didn't disappear. Every decision she made started to be examined twice. Every interaction between us at the office felt watched. As if that pressure weren't enough, an old ghost from her past returned. Rodrigo, the former partner who'd helped her start the company before selling his shares and moving away. He asked to meet as a friend because he was concerned. When she came back from that coffee, she was unusually quiet. That night, over dinner, the truth came out. He said I'm dishonoring Marcos's memory, she confessed, staring into her glass. That moving on this fast is disrespectful. It's been 5 years, Daniel, and he still thinks I should be frozen in time. The words had clearly lodged like thorns under her skin. Did you tell him he doesn't get to decide how you grieve? I asked. She shrugged weakly. Part of me wondered if he was right. In the weeks that followed, I watched her pull back slightly. More urgent, late nights at the office. More canceled dinners at the last minute. When I asked if something was wrong, she said she was just tired. But her eyes gave her away. One evening, I'd had enough. I went back to the building after hours and found her in her office again, not dancing this time, but sitting at her desk, staring at a framed photo of Marcos and Sofia. Talk to me, I said from the doorway. Please don't carry this alone again. She looked up, startled, then crumpled in on herself. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Every time I feel happy with you, I hear Rodrigo's voice telling me I'm betraying them. I crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, so we were eye to eye. Rodrigo doesn't get a vote, I said quietly. He didn't marry you. He didn't raise your daughter. He doesn't know what it's like to wake up in that empty house. She swallowed hard. But what if he's right? What if I am moving on too soon? What if I'm erasing them? I knew I had to tell her something I'd avoided sharing with anyone else. Can I tell you what Elena said the night before she died? I asked. Lucía nodded, tears already gathering. She knew there was nothing more the doctors could do. I began. The medication made her sleepy, but she was still lucid. She took my hand and said, Promise me you won't stop living when I'm gone. Promise me you won't let all the love you have die with me. I felt my throat tighten as I repeated the words. I got angry at her, I admit it. Told her not to talk like that. But she squeezed my hand and made me look at her. She was serious. She wanted me to go on. To love again. For a long moment, the only sound in the office was the air conditioning. I broke that promise for 3 years, I said. I went to work, came home, stared at the walls. I stopped answering calls. I wasn't really alive. Then I looked at Lucía. And then I saw you dancing alone in this office. For the first time since Elena died, I felt something other than emptiness. Lucía's eyes overflowed. Marcos told me something similar once, she whispered. He always said I was capable of anything. That if something ever happened to him, he wouldn't want me to give up. We both fell silent, each lost in memories of people who were no longer there, and yet still shaping our decisions. After a moment, Lucía picked up her phone. My heart raced as she dialed. Rodrigo? It's Lucía, she said when he answered. I need you to listen without interrupting. Her voice was steady, stronger than I'd heard it in weeks. I appreciate that you cared about Marcos and that you're worried about me, she continued. But you don't get to decide how I grieve, or when I'm allowed to feel something again. She listened for a moment, then shook her head. No, I'm not asking for your approval. I'm telling you that this is my life. If you can't respect that, maybe we shouldn't stay in touch. When she hung up, her hands were shaking. but she was smiling through her tears. "I can't believe I just did that," she said. "I'm proud of you," I told her. That took courage. She let out a real laugh then, a sound I realized I'd missed. "It feels like I've been holding my breath for 5 years," she said. "Like I was waiting for permission to live. And I finally realized, I don't need anyone's permission but my own." That night, instead of going our separate ways, we ordered takeout and ate in her office. We talked more openly than ever about Marcos and Sofia, about Elena, about the small, everyday things we missed most. It didn't feel like we were pushing our past away. It felt like we were finally giving it a place at the table without letting it sit in the head chair. Later, she asked me to come home with her, not out of desperation, but out of a quiet, deliberate choice. There was one more part of her life she hadn't shown me yet. "Daniel," she said softly, "I want you to see Sophia's room." We drove to her house in a comfortable silence. Upstairs, she stopped in front of a door that had clearly been closed many times with great care. When she opened it, it felt like stepping into a photograph. The walls were painted a soft lilac, with glow-in-the-dark stars scattered across the ceiling. Stuffed animals lined the shelves. Coloring books and crayons waited on a small desk, as if a child might run in at any moment. "I haven't changed anything in 5 years," Lucía said. "I was afraid that if I moved even one thing, I'd be letting her go." She walked over to the bed and picked up a worn-out stuffed rabbit. "I think I'm ready," she whispered. "Not to erase her, never that. But to let this room become something else, too. A guest room, an office, the space that can hold the future, not just the past." She turned to me, eyes shining with tears and determination. "Will you help me?" she asked. Her question wasn't just about furniture or boxes. It was about whether I was willing to build a life with someone whose story was forever intertwined with loss, just like mine. "Of course," I said. "Sofia will always be part of you. This isn't about replacing her. It's about letting your life have more chapters." We stood there for a long moment, surrounded by frozen memories and the possibility of change. We understood something very clearly that night. Grief doesn't leave, but it can learn to share space with joy. As we stepped out of the room, Lucía squeezed my hand. "Maybe," she whispered, "for the first time, I don't feel like I have to dance alone anymore." From that first night in the office to the moment we decided to slowly transform Sofia's room, months went by filled with small, brave choices. Lucía kept running Moretti Global with the same sharp mind and steady hand she'd always had, but now she did it without pretending to be made of stone. I kept working in finance, still the man who had lost his wife, but no longer defined only by that loss. We didn't get over Marcos, Sofia, or Elena. That's not how real grief works. Instead, we learned to carry them with us while still stepping forward, one uneven dance step at a time. Sometimes we still dance late at night in her office, door closed, no music, just the sound of our breathing and the city outside. Not to forget the people we loved, but to honor them by refusing to stop living. If you made it all the way here, tell me in the comments which part of this story hit you the hardest. Have you ever felt guilty for moving on, or struggled to balance memory and hope? I'd love to read your story. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Because sometimes, all it takes to start healing is finding someone who's willing to dance with you in the middle of your pain.